This is one of the best views in Paris. We're in the legendary Montmartre district in front of the Sacré-Cœur church. This area is best known for its cabarets and artists, dating back to the days when it was a haven for the likes of Picasso and Van Gogh. It's usually packed with tourists, but since COVID arrived, cultural life is suffering.
I'm José Luis Leiva-Chacon, and I'm an artist on Place de Tête.
My name is Jérôme Fegur, and I'm the representative for the Place de Tête artists.
My name is Farshad Parto, and I'm a portraitist, and I've been working here for about 30 years.
We call this area in general the Artist Square. All around the square you'll find painters, portrait artists, silhouette artists, caricaturists.
It's a community of artists who don't just come from France. I'm Spanish, there are also Russians, Poles, etc., etc. My father was also an artist. He arrived at Place de Tête in 1962. He worked in galleries and also in Montmartre, as the opportunity to interact with people there was a lot more fulfilling. I started working on the square once I passed the test.
Everything is very organized in terms of administration.
We pay rent for a metre squared, and I think it's around 400 euros.
Here's our permit, with a photo and the annual authorization.
On average, some days in the summer you would do 8 or 9 portraits a day. How has COVID affected your work?
It became really catastrophic that many people were doing nothing at all, or just one portrait a day.
So how many portraits do you think you've done since March?
Not many, maybe 12 or 15.
There's normally about 260 artists, but since COVID, only a dozen come to work on the square.
Most artists here are around 65 years old, so they don't want to come to the square anymore.
Since the international borders closed, there's no more tourism, no more customers. So it costs us money to come to work.
How do you plan a future as an artist and the world in general, whether it's for business owners, for life in general? It's hard to think about the future.
Montmartre isn't Montmartre without artists. It's as simple as that. Utrio came through here, lots of other famous artists. The pavements here smell of paint. It won't be bohemian, not the real bohemian spirit of Place de Tête.
Ok, j'espère que vous êtes satisfaits.
Oui. Bravo, bravo, merci, merci. Did you know that in the 17th century, Paris was part of the biggest winemaking region in France? There are only 10 vineyards left in the city, the largest being here in Montmartre. It's closed to the public, apart from in October during the annual Grape Harvest Festival. But it's been cancelled because of COVID restrictions. We've gained special access because 2020 is an important year for the grapes. Geoffrey Finch, you're one of Paris's wine professionals. Tell us where we are.
This is actually the Clos Montmartre. It's the largest vineyard of Paris. Here's Vincent, the man who looks after the vines.
Bonjour.
For the Mairie de Paris.
Well, there's no one here, Geoffrey, so we can take off our masks if we keep our distance.
Well, we will indeed.
Tell me a bit about the history of this place.
In 1933, this was, in fact, a barren plot of land. And the city actually was planning to build an HLM. An HLM is like a low-cost housing development. But there were a group of artists led by Poulbeau, who was an illustrator. They convinced the town hall that rather than building a building, let's plant a vineyard. Initially, they had vines that came from all over the country. The first vintage, they had absolutely no grapes. They didn't realize actually it takes a while. So let's go and have a look.
This is a new grape variety that I planted this year and last year. We make red wine and rosé with a base of Pinot and Gamay. In total, we have 26 grape varieties. It's a bit odd to have a vineyard in Paris, but we do the exact same work as they do in Bordeaux, Alsace, and we produce between 1,000 and 2,500 milliliter bottles.
In 2016, the European Commission reversed the ruling on planting for commercial purposes. And also, this year, 2020, month of May, the Île-de-France was also granted an IGP, Indication Géographique Protégée, a protected identity. There's this new impetus to actually plant vines and to produce wine. Will Paris embrace this idea and actually start to sell wine? Obviously, that's going to be difficult in an urban landscape.
Now, some modern wine connoisseurs might snub their noses at the idea, but there was a time when Paris was the centre of France's winemaking, wasn't it?
The Île-de-France was the largest wine-producing area of the country, bigger than Burgundy, Bordeaux, Champagne. Right up until the 19th century, the demise of the vineyard of the Île-de-France was actually tied to three things. The phylloxera, which is a disease that devastated all the vineyards of France. There was a drop in quality, which happened after the Revolution because people ripped up the qualitative vines to produce greater quantities, and because there was more and more people drinking wine. And then there was also the invention of the railway. It allowed wines from the south, which were much cheaper, to arrive in the ports of Paris. The vineyards of the Île-de-France gradually disappeared, but there's a renaissance.
The harvest has just taken place. It's normally the centre of a big celebration here in Montmartre, which hasn't been able to take place because of the COVID restrictions. But the grapes have been taken away. What happens to them then?
Well, once they've been harvested, they're taken to the town hall, which is where they're vinified. Let's go and have a look.
So this is where you make the wine?
Yes, exactly. This is the cellar, which is a bit unusual since it's in the basement of the 18th arrondissement town hall. It must be the only French town hall to have a cellar with a fermentation process. So as you can see, we have all the professional equipment, vats, automatic presses, barrels, and a cold room to control the temperature. It's a small cellar, but it does have everything. Initially, we did the harvest, but we ate the grapes and made juice. But I think it was much later, from the 1950s, that the decision was made to make wine. Here you have a whole collection of old wine bottles. Each year, a local artist would design the label. Now we have 500 milliliter wine bottles with different labels, each year based on a different theme. The sale of these wine bottles go towards social projects in the 18th arrondissement.
I have to ask, is Montmartre wine nice?
Of course. You'll be one of the first to taste this year's rosé. It's just finished its fermentation process and will start aging in the barrels. So, of course, it's still cloudy, as it is very young.
It's very young, but tasty.
Yes, it's very aromatic.
The future of cultural life in Montmartre remains uncertain because of the health crisis, but at least we can drink the local wine, in moderation, of course. Cheers.
France 24, c'est la richesse de la diversité culturelle mondiale avec un réseau de correspondants à travers la planète.
En France 24 en español comunicamos a Latinoamérica con el mundo entero.
روح مهنية شعارها واحد حرية التعبير. هذه هي بصمة France 24.
Africa on France 24 is about its people and their stories.
Los ciudadanos nos cuentan cuáles son las iniciativas y las problemáticas que tienen en sus comunidades a través del programa Los Observadores. Eso los acerca aún más a France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité. The period between the Second World War, when colonial troops fought fiercely with General de Gaulle's Free France, and 1960, when 14 African countries under French administration acquired their independence, marked the end of an empire. Through 4 charismatic leaders, France 24 traces the genesis of their path towards sovereignty. From the Senegalese Léopold Sédar Senghor, prodigal son of the colonial era, to the Guinean rebel Sékou Touré, who defied de Gaulle's authority. From Ivorian Houphouët Boigny, who manoeuvred skillfully behind the scenes of La Franca-Afrique, to Barthélemy Baganda, father of the Central African Republic, who paid with his life for his nationalist commitment. 4 remarkable careers that would shape modern Africa. Don't miss this exclusive documentary on France 24.